Hello.
Now I'm unmuted. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, and we are 8. Yes, we're just waiting for Ophelia.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Looking sharp today. That's good.
Oh, we are.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah.
I just want to say, I was sharing with Christian a few minutes ago that an hour ago, we have 120 registered participants.
Wow.
Which is amazing, representing 27 out of 32
27 now.
international committees. That's amazing. I mean,
We're in the middle
Congratulations
of
to you.
Yeah.
To all of
Congratulations.
us.
It means it's not only presidents and secretaries, but also board members.
Also
Right.
board members, yes.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Also board members, but also some, I see on the registration that we have a couple of, I mean, a few just regular members that want to know more about, you know, how their committees works. And that is amazing. I think that's the whole idea about this series, is just to educate, you know, just to prepare our board members being more knowledgeable. And that's amazing. I'm really happy for that.
And thank you to board members.
Yeah.
Thank you all for making this possible.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. You made it possible.
Yeah, yeah.
We all,
it's been really.
We all did.
Okay, so let's see if we can still congratulate each other in 1 hour from now.
That's the challenge, right?
We hope so. So we're still waiting for Alberto and Ophelia.
Okay.
Yeah, and we need to wait until 4 to start.
Right, and also I would like to, you know, take this few minutes just to give you an update of the pre-submitted question that we received before today. So basically, those questions, mostly all of them are pointing out to the IRIS database and how difficult it is for all the international committees to be able to accomplish and be able to achieve their own activities with the current limitations to access the members. So that is something that I see on all the, you know, general questions that we're getting. We will get anyway, we will send this all these questions, we will send it along with the other questions. I'm preparing a document where all these questions will be presented by categories, like IRIS database, and then all the questions, or other technical support, or just general questions. So we will be preparing that document.
I am thinking that regarding the IRIS database, I recall that this is the topic, isn't it, for the next webinar that we're planning to do? So I think that maybe, I mean, rather than creating confusion right now about the IRIS database, just encourage people to attend that webinar. We can introduce IRIS from the start and what has been done and what is the situation and what are the plans. And maybe I hope that there will be questions now during this webinar that address the topics that we are dealing with here, and where we have the experts in the panel for that kind of topics. So if there are ways that we can put those questions forward to the next webinar, I think that should be the way to deal with those.
So yeah, regarding that also, Christian, maybe we can, you know, the working group, we can go through all the feedback that we have previously regarding the IRIS database and try to break down all those comments or questions into specific categories. So then we can, you know, then we can take a look at the, you know, different areas of the database and see how we can just break down the general concern into items that we can actually discuss one by one. So we can definitely do that.
And on that,
team,
sorry, Antonio. No, I spoke to the data protection officer this morning to try to come up with solutions that we discussed yesterday, and what you suggested, Antonio, seems to be feasible. So it's quite a good news. Yes. And so we'll have to review the form of membership to include this, but it should be feasible and hopefully this year so that it's solved. And also with regard to the license for the IC, so it's quite good news.
So maybe we could get someone to ask that question during our, so that Morgan can actually respond. I think that would be good. If maybe you can ask later in the Q&A, Antonio,
Yes,
regarding
definitely.
particular that, because then we have already a good response to that question.
Yes, I will do it.
Good.
Okay.
Hello, Ophelia. Yeah. You're unmuted.
Is this hello everyone? Good afternoon.
Yeah,
Is
good
this the right? Is this the right volume, Antonio?
It's
Everyone?
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. And can we hear everybody? Can you hear me? I hope so.
Yeah, perfectly
Yeah.
well.
Good.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Marine, can we hear you?
Yeah.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody.
Great. So we still need Ato. So.
Christiana, you'll be to all panelists. So there's already people are already on. There's a
Yes,
chat,
but
or is that
but they are not here yet.
They can't hear us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not in the room.
Different frequencies. Hello, Alberto. Welcome.
Alberto's here. Hello, Alberto.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alberto, you're mute. Yes. Let me just. Yeah.
Here I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we
good.
can hear you. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Ciao, ciao.
Yeah.
Let's say hi to the camera to take a screenshot just before we started this.
Hi. Hi to the camera.
Hi. Hi to the camera.
No.
So, are you shooting?
You okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I just did it.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So
Christiana, you'll be sharing the presentation online, yeah?
I will be sharing the presentation. So you just say next slide, please, and then I'm just rolling. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. So they can hear everything they say.
That's what they
I thought so. And they can see us as well.
Already. We're already online.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, but we have no secrets here.
Yeah. It's good. It's good.
Hello, everyone on the chat. Let's see. Hello to Slovenia, to Ecuador, to Gordon McKenna and Joan Reif-Snyder, and Hanneke Kik, and Joan Reif-Snyder.
And my fellow IC board member, Julie Leclerc. Julie, thank you for joining us from Canada.
And Cornelis, hello.
And hello to all the 120 participants.
Yeah, and we will start in 1 minute from now. So maybe I should start sharing the screen, Antonio. So let's unmute and I'll share the screen. Okay. How many have you let in, Antonio? Are we ready
have
to?
60. We have 61 participants.
So do you want me to start right on?
Maybe we can wait 1 more minute.
We'll just wait a couple of minutes. So Antonio, can you please let me know when you think we have the
I think we need, yes, I think we need to start now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need to. Okay. Welcome everybody. My name is Christiane Streckbaum, and I am chair of the International Committees Working Group and spokesperson for the International Committees in ICOM. And I will lead you through this webinar. Antonio Rodriguez, my colleague in this working group, has kindly offered to host and moderate this webinar. And before starting, I will just remind you of the rules for participation. The meeting is recorded for later access and record keeping and will be posted on ICOM member space. And the link will be placed under the International Committees tab. To ensure good connectivity, please turn off your video and mute your microphones, and use the chat box to provide comments and your questions. Background documents and useful information are available from the International Committees tab on the ICOM member space. And at the end of the webinar, please provide your feedback in the post-webinar survey. And now, let me say a warm welcome to you all to this premiere, to this webinar 1 under the auspices of the International Committees Working Group. This is the first of a planned series of webinars that are with the overall aim to address topics of relevance to the ICOM International Committees, its chairs, and the board members. For this webinar, we have 120 people registered. I see we have now 80 people in, representing more than 25 international committees. The webinars are organized by the members of the International Committees Working Group in collaboration with the ICOM Secretariat, and it has been a pleasure to plan this webinar with 2 of the staff members in the Secretariat, namely the ICOM Management Accountant Florian Coty and the Legal and Institutional Affairs Coordinator Morgan Fouquet-Lapart, who are both joining us today. The theme for this webinar is Introduction to ICOM International Committees, and it aims to give an overview of the organization and some of the basic rules and requirements of the international committees. We will address the current situation, but also point out at some issues where the international committees need to develop and work, both amongst themselves and in collaboration with the International Committees Working Group and the ICOM Secretariat. The program for today is that I will start by providing a brief overview of the ICOM organization and governance. Florian will give an overview of the requirements of finances and budget management. Morgan will provide an overview of the legal affairs. And then Ophelia Leon will sum up how the ICOM internal rules affect the international committees and where we need to look into improvements, as this webinar should also be a starting point for further discussions. We have set aside time for questions and answers, and Antonio will keep track of the questions that you're writing in the chat box. In addition to the presenters, I'm also pleased to welcome in the panel the ICOM President Alberto Galandini and ICOM Director General Peter Keller, and 2 more members of the International Committees Working Group, Jean Hilgosum and Pierre Reikdal. Thank you for joining us. My first slides will address the ICOM organization and governance. ICOM now has 45,880 individual members and 3,051 institutional members, and they are organized in the following structure. First, there is the executive board with the president, 2 vice presidents, 1 treasurer, and up to 15 ordinary members, and an ex officio advisory chair. Then there are the different committees and groups, the national committees, international committees, regional alliances, affiliated organizations, standing committees, and working groups. Another major body of ICOM is the Advisory Council, consisting of the advisory chair, chairs from all national and international committees, and chairs from all the regional alliances and affiliated organizations. The ICOM Secretariat is the oil in the organization. It works on the operational level and is subject to the order and decisions of the Executive Board. The Director General is head of the Secretariat, which employs, I believe it is now 26 staff members, and they serve in 6 offices: the membership, finance and general services, administrative and legal services, heritage protection and capacity building, publication and documentation, and communications and public relations. And this slide addresses the governance and the roles of the ICOM bodies. ICOM's primary authority resides in its members. The General Assembly is ICOM's supreme decision-making and legislative body, composed of all individual and representatives, designated by institutional members, students, supporting and honorary members, and changes in ICOM statutes must be approved by the General Assembly. The Executive Board is the decision-making body of ICOM. The Executive Board is elected by ICOM members through the international committees, national committees, regional alliances, and affiliated organizations. The Executive Board is the head of the organization. It implements strategies and takes the necessary actions decided by the General Assembly. The Executive Board ensures the good management, overseeing ICOM's various resources. And the Advisory Council is of major interest to the international committees. This is our major forum in ICOM governance. The Advisory Council advises the Executive Board and the General Assembly on policies, programs, procedures, and finances of ICOM, and may propose amendments to the statutes. It advises on matters and activities in the general interest of ICOM and as recommended by the Executive Board and other ICOM components. The activities of the Advisory Council shall be reported to the General Assembly for approval and at its next meeting. And also, members of the advisory elect the advisory chair. And one spokesperson of the national committees and one spokesperson of the international committees are elected by the chairs of the national committees and the international committees to prepare and present the recommendations of the committees in the Advisory Council sessions. The ICOM Secretariat initiates, realizes, and evaluates programs. It handles membership files, records, and manages finances, and protects and promotes the identity of the organization. And now follows a brief introduction to the various bodies of ICOM. ICOM has 180 national committees. A national committee is a separate legal entity and may be authorized by the Executive Board to represent the interest of museums and the museum profession in the state. All ICOM members must be member of the national committee in the country they reside. As per December 2019, more than 22,000 individual members have selected membership in one of ICOM's 32 international committees. That is 46% of ICOM's members. In 2019, 2 international committees were approved on probation by the Executive Council, the DRMC, Disaster Resilient Museums Committee, and the IC Ethics, the International Committee for Ethical Dilemmas. So there are now 32 international committees. You will note that most of the international committees identify themselves with acronyms, which for outsiders may seem like secret codes, and this could also be something to look at into the future. Then the affiliated organizations. Currently, there are 22 of them. And the executive board may grant affiliated status to international organizations with the purpose of serving the interest of museums or the museum profession on an international level. Then there are the other bodies. ICOM has 7 regional alliances. A regional alliance may be authorized by the executive board to serve as a forum for exchange of information and cooperation between national committees, museums, and museum professionals in the region. Per Article 5.2 in the ICOM internal rules, the standing committees are appointed by the president after consultation with the executive board. The mandate of a standing committee is indefinite, and the committee reports and operates under the authority of the executive board. And currently ICOM has 7 standing committees. And as per Article 5.1 in the internal rules, the president of ICOM may, with the approval of the executive board, establish temporary working groups for special purposes, define their mission, their term of office, membership, and their duration. The chair of each working group submits its report to the president of ICOM and the executive board. Of particular interest here is, of course, the International Committee, the working group on the future of the international committees, the ICWG. And what is the purpose of the ICWG? It is to investigate and review ICOM's international committees, in particular problems, issues, and obstacles of the international committees, along with possible solutions. Issues and questions that are not currently adequately addressed in international committees in their activities, and possible ways that the international committees could use to address contemporary issues within the international committee structure, changes to the international committees, and ways to better support the international committees in the work. And to this is the theme of today. That is actually how to support the international committees in their management and functioning. And with these words, I would like to give the table to Florian Grotti, the management accountant in ICOM.
Hello everyone. I am going to present you 4 slides. Next slide, please. First, how to get started just after the election, what needs to be done to get fully operational. Then the general framework, what are the rules imposed on ICOM and on the ICs. Then questions that arise when organizing annual conferences. And finally, I will tell you about the annual report that needs to be submitted at the end of the year. I use a 3-color code so that you know who is doing what. The chair corresponds to the red little square, the treasurer corresponds to the light blue little square, and the regular board members correspond to the green little square. To start with, among board members, a volunteer shall be appointed treasurer. It is an important role as he collects the invoices and he is led to create payments, sometimes international transfers. Then the chair, treasurer, and regular board members need to agree on a budget. The chair and the treasurer are given access to the bank account with little red security devices like this one. All the expenses processed by the chair and the treasurer shall be in line with the budget approved by the board. Note that both the chair and the treasurer need to be involved in the process to get a payment paid by the bank for security reasons. But the chair can have a credit card. It is pretty useful when on the spot of the conference or to purchase things that cannot be purchased by bank transfer, such as online subscriptions. Then next slide, please. In item 2.1, we can see the general rules and regulations which are imposed on ICOM and subsequently on the ICs, and there is nothing ICOM can do about that. So the first one is the golden rule. We shall not have any transaction if there is any direct or indirect relation with a country subject to an embargo. It implies no payment when the origin or the destination or when the purpose of the payment has something to do with a country subject to an embargo. And ICOM would be in trouble even if it is a €1 transaction. It doesn't mean that the ICs cannot organize events there. It just means that we need to proceed differently in compliance with the rules which are imposed on us. I know that the IC separate meeting made a recommendation about that, and we will answer it. We will let you know what we have tried to do and what can be done at the moment. Then we need to make sure the IC's payments cannot be seen as undeclared work. It means professors cannot get some work done by students. Also, if you know a talented person who can get some work done for the IC, remember that we can pay honoraries if only that person has created a sole proprietorship company in his country. And we will verify, we will ask for the company registration number to make sure he did create his company. Then each transaction shall be justified. To put it simple, no invoice, no payment, so that we make sure at the end of the year, each transaction is justified with an invoice. Subsidies shall be justified with a letter from the funder. Now moving on to item 2.2. These are rules and regulations that are imposed by ICOM to the ICs so that we create a framework that suits best what the ICs were designed for. So the ICs cannot create other bank accounts. The ICOM president and the ICOM treasurer shall have the power of signature on all bank accounts. The ICs cannot establish labor contracts. ICOM staff are part of the ICOM secretariat and subject to the French labor code. And recently we have Marine who is joining us to help the ICs. ICs cannot purchase fixed assets such as photocopiers, laptops, and so on, but they may rent some stuff instead. No per diems, because a document indicating that somebody received, let's say, €100 to cover meals and transportations is not satisfactory. We need scans of food receipts and transportation tickets. And for information, IC's activities are not covered with an insurance. You may need to ask the local partner whether they have one. Item 2.3 is just to remember that unfortunately, hackers have become part of the IC's environment as well for a few years, trying to manipulate and steal money from the bank account. And sometimes they also target board members as well. So you need to stay on your guard. This slide shows you a small part of the organization of an annual conference, but those questions are the ones having the biggest impact on the IC's finances. Depending on whether the organization of the conference is delegated to the partner or not, the transactions will be recorded in the IC's accounting or in the partner's accounting. If the IC chooses to collect the registration fees, participants would be able to pay only by bank transfer. So if you wish to enable them to pay by credit card, you need to choose an online platform such as Brown Paper's Tickets or Eventbrite, but it can be tricky to set up. Just below is a list of tasks IC's chairs and treasurers are led to deal with. Item 3.3 is a recommendation from the ICOM auditors. It is best to have the participants sign an attendance sheet as a material proof these events really took place or workshop really took place. For online meetings, you can record them or you can keep any evidence at your disposal with the online tools. Next slide, please. At the end of the year or at the very beginning of the new year, the ICs need to send to ICOM Secretariat the activity report. Usually the chair is in charge of writing the narrative part, detailing all the activities carried out over the year, and the treasurer is in charge of the financial report. Concerning the budget for the following year, the treasurer is in charge of filling in the Excel document, but the figures should reflect the opinion of the board. It's the same for the chair when it comes to describe in the narrative part the planned activities for next year. It should reflect the direction the board is heading to. This is why I use the 3 little squares to show that everybody is involved in this process. And if during the year the IC has an opportunity to take part in a project which was not mentioned in the initial budget, then the board members, the IC board members may be consulted and they can agree on a revised budget. If so, please send the revised budget to the ICOM Secretariat and you're good to go with the revised budget. In a nutshell, this is all for the finances. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Florian. And please remember to put your questions in the chat and we will take them at the end of this session. Now I'm pleased to introduce Morgan Fouquet-Lapin, who is the Legal and Institutional Affairs Coordinator in the ICOM Secretariat.
Christiana, thank you very much. Dear chairs and members of the international committees, dear members of the IC working group, dear president, dear director general, good morning everyone. Buenos dias a todos. Bonjour à toutes et tous. I hope that you are all doing well. Before beginning my presentation, I would like to thank very warmly Christiana and Antonio for inviting us and for all their efforts in organizing these important seminars on the way to better support the international committees regarding management and functioning. And I hope that this discussion today will be helpful for you and that we can have maybe regular meetings in the future to exchange, discuss, build, communicate all together in the interest and development of the international committees. As we have quite a tight schedule for today, I focused my presentation on some key aspects, but if you have any further question on other topics, I'll be happy to answer them. My objective today is to present to you with an overview of the general legal framework that applies to the ICs and how this frames management matters. After that, I will also provide a very brief update regarding the projects the Secretariat has been working on to support the ICs on the sensitive issue of GDPR. So next slide, please. Thank you. Yep. Let's start with an overview of the general legal framework that defines the role, mission, and responsibilities of an IC within ICOM. So international committees are key components of ICOM. They play an important communication role as a forum bringing together museum professionals from all over the world to dedicate themselves to a specific subjects. And this expertise leads the ICs to being responsible for developing and implementing ICOM's programs and activity that directly relates to each committee's specific mandates. Moreover, the ICs can also provide advice to the ICOM Executive Board, the Advisory Council, and the Director General on matters relevant to ICOM's mission and programs. As key components of ICOM, the ICs are also represented in all statutory meetings. During the Advisory Council, the IC is represented via its chair or as a designated representative. And during the General Assembly, the IC appoints up to 5 voting members to vote on behalf of the committee on the items that are brought up to the attention of the General Assembly. Next slide, please. And to fulfill this mission, while also ensuring the protection of the interest of ICOM and the international museum community, the ICs are subject to what you are seeing on the screen right now, which are the ICOM statutes that provide general binding provisions regarding the functioning of ICOM, the ICOM internal rules, where you can find a set of rules that apply specifically only to the international committees, the ICOM Code of Ethics for Museums that each member of ICOM and thus of an IC has to comply with, and also possible decision of the General Assembly and or the Executive Board that may bind an international committee. In addition to this general framework, which can be seen as minimum and mandatory requirements for all, the ICs themselves adopt bylaws that are complementary and that should guide their functioning and management. These rules or bylaws or whatever they are called are often adopted at the first meeting of an IC after its creation is approved by the ICOM Executive Board and may be amended over time depending on the evolution of the committee. In this regard, I would like to underline that in 2005, a document called The Rules for International Committees was made available to guide members of an IC in the drafting of their rules. And you can find this document in the documentation that was provided to you ahead of this meeting. But this document has since been replaced by the 2017 internal rules with the addition of some provisions regarding, for instance, the process on how to establish an IC, its suspension, etc. So I encourage you to refer to the internal rules of 2017, which are updated. One of the recommendations that was emitted by the ICs this year during our annual meetings was to suggest that these rules from 2017 be revised to take into consideration the question of GDPR, unforeseen events such as COVID, and throughout general harmonization. And to achieve this, one of the important aspects that was just started by the International Committee Working Group was to collect all the documents that apply for each international committee. And to achieve this revision of the rule, one of the important aspects which I think would help in this regard would be for the IC Working Group and the Secretariat to collect all the bylaws or documents or guidelines of each IC to compare and identify best practices which could then be reflected in the revised internal rules. So as you can see on the screen, this is what the IC Working Group has collected so far. That will be of use when we go ahead with this revision of this possible revision of the internal rules. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this general framework to which the international committees are subject to also provides minimum requirements on how an IC should function and be managed. Florian has already provided some key information regarding finances, so I will be more general. First, there is a requirement regarding composition. So an international committee is composed of at least 50 ICOM members in good standing, and any member in good standing and upon request may join the IC. And it is up to the IC to keep an updated list of its members. And to manage all of these members and the committee itself, elections must be held every 3 years, preferably during the ICOM Triennial Conference, to elect a chair and the board, but there is no recommendation as of now regarding the number of other board members, but based on the experience of the rules for 2005, at least 4 other board members, such as a vice chair, a treasurer, that is key, a secretary, ordinary board members, a manager, etc., should be elected to ensure the good management of the IC. This may also vary between each IC depending on their rules. And if there is some flexibility for each IC on how it can establish a board and who is part of this board, there are, however, some requirements regarding the candidatures process that you can find in the internal rules. And if you are in the process of electing your new board in the next few months, I invite you to consult those. And also requirement in the internal rules and in the spirit of institutional renewal, the internal rules provide for a limit on the plurality of mandates. This means that an elected board member, including the chair, is elected for a 3-year term that is renewable once, but no board member may remain in office for more than 12 consecutive years. In addition to that, the chair of an IC may not at the same time serve as a chair of a national committee or an affiliated organization, a regional alliance, or be a member of the executive board. Now, one very important aspect that I would like to stress and which impacts the functioning of the international committee and particularly the board is that unlike national committees, international committees are not legal persons. So what does this mean in practice? I'll give a very, very short lesson, low lesson, I promise. We have to distinguish between natural persons, so for instance, me, your neighbor, your colleague, and a legal person, which is often a gathering of individuals in a company, charity, or institution, as it is the case for ICOM itself, the national committees, and one could say as well for the international committees. However, the difference is that a legal person has a legal existence. It means it's registered in a country and subject to the laws of that country, which is not the case for the international committees. And it is only through this registration and legal existence that an entity has the capacity to enter into agreements or contracts. And as a non-legal entity, an international committee can thus not establish contract or enter into contractual relations or legally binding partnerships. As of now, the only solution that is available is the signing of a delegation of authority from the ICOM president to the chair of the IC that would like to enter into an agreement, but it is an administrative process that limits the autonomy of the international committees. But I'm glad to share with you that this issue has been brought up by Goranka Orjan. I'm not sure if she's there. If she is, I'm saying hello, who is the current chair of the LEAC. And she has brought up this attention to the attention of the LEAC, and we hope to be able to find an easier solution for the ICs in that regard. Furthermore, since ICs have no legal personality of their own, if they carry out legal acts, they are likely to engage the responsibility of ICOM. And this point should be borne in mind, and in particularly by the chair, who is responsible to ensure that the committee's activities do not compromise ICOM financially or professionally. And in this regard, the IC should submit, as Florian underlined, a moral and financial report every year to ICOM. And if you are entering into an agreement, I invite you to consult the legal office if you encounter any doubts. So these are the main elements you will need to take into consideration within the board of an international committee. Ophelia will provide more information on the meetings of the ICs themselves. But before that, I would like to give a very brief information about an important project that the Secretariat has been working on, but had to be postponed in light of the events that occurred since the beginning of the pandemic, which is the GDPR. So as you all know, the question of the protection of the personal data of the ICOM members is very important and is strictly framed by the GDPR, to which ICOM has been taking all the necessary steps to comply with. And as this regulation affects the good management and functioning of an international committee, the Secretariat has been working very hard to find solutions. And in order to best support you, we will circulate in the next few weeks, probably in the beginning of September when people are back from vacation, a letter asking you to send us all your questions regarding the GDPR and how it affects your work within the international committee. We will then collect those questions and do a brochure answering all of your questions and provide guidelines. The next step will then to put in place a charter or an agreement, if you prefer, that will provide a framework defining the roles and responsibilities between ICOM and the ICs in the process of processing personal data, which shall provide more autonomy to the ICs. And with this quick update, I have now finished my presentation, which I hope has been useful. And I hope that we can continue and pursue our dialogue all together. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Morgan. Again, I will remind you to write your questions in the chat. I will give the word to Ophelia Leon, also member of the ICWG. Unmute, please.
Thank you, Christiana. Presentation has been done in collaboration with ICWG members. Next, I will try to hurry through on the one hand, because Morgan has touched upon some of the issues that we were going through here, and on the other hand, because we're running late. So it's basically, how do ICOM internal rules affect ICs is what we want to discuss. And if you look at ICOM's internal rules and focus on Article 7, that is precisely what describes international committees. And 7.1 refers concretely how each committee may develop its own rules as long as they're in compliance with 1, ICOM statutes, 2, internal rules, ICOM's internal rules, and 3, code of ethics. IC rules are sometimes called bylaws, but please remember that any amendments to the rules need to be approved by ICOM's executive board. Chris, next, please. Now, sometimes it's difficult to read through these rules, and these are just some suggestions in trying to make rules clearer. We suggest that the tool be developed as a frequently asked questions to provide clearer understanding. And what this would avoid is rewording rules to convey the same meaning. Pierre Bjorn, who has been involved with rules and IC regulations from the beginnings, has historically found that this only creates problems. And so we wanted to point that out. To communicate clearly by quoting the rules and thus avoid the errors of interpretations. Next, Christiana, please. And then these are some just reminders when going through the rules, and in general, Morgan already said ICs are not separate legal entities, and she went a little bit further into detail on that. Each member of an IC can choose to have voting rights in only one IC. And I'll stop at this because we've already had a couple of questions regarding this, and it's an issue that comes up time and again. In the membership form that we fill every year or at the beginning, you have a choice of your main IC, and 42%, as Christiana said at the beginning, make that choice to belong to an IC. And that IC becomes your main IC you're a voting member of. Now you're also we're also given a choice to have 2 extra ICs of our interest. What happens is that because of problems with the database, it's hard enough for the main IC to get the information about your pertaining to that IC, and let alone those other 2 ICs. So it becomes somewhat of a difficult situation when you're expecting to get information from the 2nd or 3rd IC of your choice. So we're wondering, as to not create false expectations, whether we should just make it a rule that you belong to 1 IC and that is your main IC that you're a voting member of, and then you can access information about any IC directly by contacting them and asking them to put you in their mailing list, etc. This is also part of the situation that we're talking about with the GDPR. As Morgan said, we'll know more about that later in September. An IC must maintain a membership of at least 50 members, that's already been said, and the yearly report is required of all ICs. Now, archives, this is an issue that maintaining archives has been a duty since the very beginning, but it's created a problem with successive boards not following through on archive material. So this is something that needs to be looked at, and this is why we put it in capital letters. The annual meetings and annual events are also common to all ICs, and it's not necessarily reflected and should be in the rules for all ICs. Now, I'll stop again here just for a moment. This year, a lot of back and forth and much focus was given to the formalities of the yearly meeting. And chairs were misled to believe that, like ICOM, ICs needed to have an equivalent of a General Assembly by the 31st of July. This is not the case. As has been said before, ICs are not separate legal entities, and therefore, since our main task is to promote and debate professional issues, It's normally done in a yearly meeting. Next slide, please. And this is the yearly meeting when we have the membership meeting, not necessarily by July 1st by law. As the annual conference are the IC's main activity and point of commonality, we have made some suggestions for developing shared tools. And when I say we, I'm saying the ICWG. And this was published last year. And here we leave you with the link. You can look at these recommendations. Some of them, for example, have already been made, put into action, which is got Marine Vallon, who's with us today as the coordinator for the ICs appointed at the Secretariat. Also, we asked for a common tool for registration and payment collection, and have been working with Florian on that for some time. This is something that is common to all ICs. We make an annual meeting every year, and it'd be very helpful to have that. Connecting ICs database to the mailing for example, a common template for a newsletter with emailing capacities. Next, please. And these are just some of the recommendations. And other issues that are requiring special attention, as we all know, is IRIS, the database that is not providing what we all want and what we all need. A question that was raised is how do ICs get the information, and this is part of the IRIS issue. The GDPR, with Morgan just said with us for quite some time, and that would be available sometime this year in the fall. The elections, to look into different options for the board elections that also could be common to us all, such as online practices and to facilitate board elections. And the IC's own rules. What is the status? As Morgan said, in 2017, there was an update to the ICOM statutes and rules, and IC rules need to be updated, most of them, to comply with the 2017 rules. So this, are the things. We encourage you all to read the internal rules, particularly Article 7. And then I think we'll be continuing with providing a further webinar if necessary on the issue, or if you could send in your questions. And also the questions at the end of the webinar, the survey, if you could put in there anything that could be of value, and if you think this would be necessary, that could be one of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ophelia. And now we reach the question and answer, and Antonio has picked up a lot of questions and in the chat box. And those of you who actually heard our conversation before the meeting started would have heard that we talked about questions addressing the IRIS database. And there are quite a lot of them that we received prior to this webinar. And as we are planning, we, again, the working group of the international committees, we are planning to have a new webinar in September about the IRIS database. So the idea is now to categorize the questions that we have received from IRIS, and we are happy to take more, and to create a webinar about these problems. So we will not respond to that many questions about IRIS right now, maybe things regarding GDPR, but the others will be directed towards our next webinar. But Antonio, what have you received of questions?
Yes, so I have questions for Floriana, I have question for Morgan, and also question for Ophelia. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to pick those questions that that are not repeated themselves. So then we will, I will just mention a few questions to Florian first based on what we receive, and then he will have the opportunity to answer those questions, and then I will do the same with Morgan and then with Ophelia. The idea is after these questions are answered, all participants are invited to speak if you want to. Just keep in mind that we have 14 minutes left, so please limit your speaking time to 1 minute, and please indicate here in the chat if you want speaking time. So going with Florian question, the first one, does the treasurer need to be elected by the IC's member during election of the board, or can the board members decide it themselves who is the treasurer? That's the first one. The second one is, let me just read at least 3 questions for you, and then you will be able to, to wrap up a general comment for all of those. Question number 2 is, does ICOM have a budget for ICs, and are all ICs funded equally? Another question that I have for you is, should IC board chairs and treasurers share the budget with IC board members? Why can't IC vice chair be a spokesperson of member of advisory council? Another question that I have related to Florian is, anything extra we should know about the special measure with budget or financial management because of COVID-19?
Okay.
Those are questions for you, Florian.
So in the internal rules, I didn't see that the chair should be elected directly. So I take it for granted that the chair should be a volunteer chosen among board members. Then whether the ICOM has a budget for the ICs and if it is funded equally. In here, we're talking about the support to the network. Every year, ICOM send to the ICs the annual subsidy, which depends on 3 criteria. There is a set amount of 850 euros, I think. The second is based on the number of members in each IC, and the third one depends on the evaluation of the IC. And this is made by the SAREC. So there is an annual subsidy every year, but the ICs are not funded equally. And I know that there is the IC separate meeting made a recommendation that the work done by SAREC was made public. Then we also have ICOM projects. Each IC is free to ask for support for specific projects, but which should be different from the annual conference. And there is also young members grants amounting to 1,200 euros for each IC. So this one is equally shared among the ICs. And then last question was, should the chair treasurer share the budget with the board? No, it was the other question from Ikme.
The last question was, the last question was related to COVID-19. If there is anything extra, international committee should know any special measure with budget or financial management they need to be aware of because of COVID-19 situation.
We understand that, for example, special projects may be postponed to 2021. But this is all I know about it. Let's see next year how the SAREC will react about that. But so far, with the instructions I received, it's okay if the funds are not spent this year.
Okay, so perfect. Thank you, Florian. I appreciate that. So now let's go with Morgan. So we received some question for her. And I just want to say in the meantime that all unanswered questions will be submitted to the speaker. So we will be sharing the responses anyway. So for Morgan, let's see. Why only the deliberations and decision of each assembly shall be reported to members and not the whole process? Can we change this in the statutes? Can we record each assembly like we're doing right now? This is a great practice. Another question is, how can ICOM headquarters assist and prepare the ICs with optimal insights in their own members' data? Secondly, to set up communication directly with IC members for more engagement and optical members focused programming. And actually this led me to the comment that we have been discussing the possibility of adding to the database a checkbox that will allow ICOM members, as they renew their membership, a checkbox that give authorization to pass their own information, the members' information, to other different ICOM groups. So if we can do this, then members will be available to check that box, so your information will go to your national or international committee. That's my understanding, right, Morgan?
Yes, yes, exactly. I'll just answer your question before answering the other questions. This is something that has been brought up many times, that there has been some issues of communication and engagement for the international committees that are those of interest for the members, because the information is not shared easily because of how the IRIS database is structured as of now, and on how the forms to become a member have been drafted. But this is something that we are currently in the process of reviewing, so that it's easier to exchange information. So hopefully what we will be able to implement is that in the new form that you receive every year to renew your membership, there will be an additional item where you will have to agree that your personal data will be shared with the international committees that you wish to be part of. And once this is confirmed, the membership department will be able to include this information in the IRIS database, and automatically the members will be able to receive information, and thus there will be easier communication and engagement between the different international committees and their members. Now, just getting back to what Florian received as a first question, which was on the election of the chair, I'm just correcting something, is that according to the internal rules, the chair is elected separately from the board. So there is a distinction between the chair and the other board members. But of course, this is a requirement. It cannot be changed, but within each international committee, the rules may change on whether or not the treasurer or the other board members should be elected either by the membership of the international committee or by the board members themselves. So this is just to reply to what Florian said. Regarding the question on why only the deliberation and decision of each assembly shall be reported to members and not the whole process, I am not quite sure what is understood under the whole process. So if you could just, Alina, underline what this would be. And can we record each assembly like we are doing now? This is great practice. I definitely agree with you, and I think we all agree that this is a great practice that has been just implemented this year, and hopefully we can continue this in the future. So we have this for archives purposes and for the history of ICOM. And with regards to the question of the Secretariat and the IRIS database, maybe Marine has more information on that.
Before we go to Marie, I have another comment here, another question regarding database, and is when a new member is registered and joined an IC, does the secretary inform the IC? And if yes, what does the IC to do to welcome that new member? And when ICs are informed of that new member that are joined the committees?
This again, we will go to Marine.
Okay.
When a new member joins an IC, this is registered in the IRIS database, and all the international committees have an access to IRIS and should export the list of the new members and after contact them directly.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary. So so now we have 5 more minutes before we finish. So I would like to get back to Christian, or maybe Alberto or Peter want to say something, so we have a few more minutes. Or anybody wants to take some speaking time. If not, I would like to invite Alberto, maybe. Christian, back to you.
Yes, I think it would be good to hear if our President Gardini has something to add to this meeting.
Thank you. Quite interesting meeting. I'm here to listen to what is coming up from the international committees. However, just let me say a few words. Well, I really think that times change, expectation change, and also ICOM should change as quickly as possible, really. We have to improve our working methods. We have to improve our communication. I really think that long-standing problems about our internal communication, well, have become really governance problem. So we have to focus on internal communication and what we can do immediately, what we can plan in the next future, and what it could take much more time. So first of all, I really think that the only one positive outcome of COVID-19 has been that this tragedy, it's been a tragedy all over the world, but at least one positive outcome is that now we have been accustomed to these video conferences. Really, it's not acceptable that the executive board meets only 2 times a week. The international committees meet only once in a year, once in a year in Paris. So we really now we can do this kind of video conference quite often. And of course, communication is a two-way process. The executive board has to inform much better of what is going on, and we are trying to do it. And please look at the membership space, because we publish everything in the membership space. So I know that sometimes we don't care about the member space in the ICOM website, but we publish everything there. For example, I know that the standing committees appointments are a great concern, and I totally agree. The present process to appoint standing committees and working group has to be changed. That's for sure. Now it's just a decision from the president in consultation with AB. The international committees, the national committee should be included in the process. We have to change immediately. All the next decision that AB will be taken in consultation with the national international committee through the president of the advisor and the 2 spokespersons, but even in a, I may say, 2-way communication system with the national international committees. But we will have to change the internal rules, sometimes even the statutes, because sometimes change the internal rules should be done by the EB, but then there is something correlated to the statute. However, the process to appoint standing committees has to be changed. Other things have to be changed. We will have to discuss all together from September on what we can do immediately. But I assure you that this necessity of a major improvement in communication is really crucial. And I finish, I don't want to waste your time. If you look at in the member space of the ICOM, our first internal review, we focus a lot on communication, on changing our way of communication and the different process. Okay, I see it. Go there and look at it. Of course, the internal review is a first step. We had the duty to self-assess, to self-analysis what we do to avoid to make always the same mistake. But then, of course, we have proposed solution, but there will be for sure many other solutions that will come from our membership, from you, from the international committee, from the national committees. We are waiting for that. Of course, let me finish that. Well, we know very well our long-standing problems. Now we have to focus on solution and try to go on steadily, carefully but steadily change and improve. And we are trying to do our best in this direction. Thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't talk too much.
Thank you very much, Antonio. But talking about solution, I will just also show you here, if you go to the member space on the website, there is the toolbox for international committees, where we are posting all the important documents relating to the international committees. So this is also one of the things that we are doing now and for the future. And yes, we are reaching towards the end of our webinar, and yeah, I think we were around.
Just stay with us for 2 more minutes. We're about to finish. Yes.
2 more minutes, yes. And here we have a post-webinar satisfaction survey to improve the future webinars. We want to have your feedback regarding today's webinar. So please take a few minutes to fill out the online survey so that you can, so that your opinion can be considered. And the link is here, and I believe Antonio will also share that link in the chat. And there's also this QR code that if you take a snapshot with your camera or tablet, you can easily access the SurveyMonkey. And before closing this webinar, I will just again say thank you. First of all of you who joined this. I think we were 102 attendees at the highest. And I would also convey a warm thank you to the great colleagues in the Secretariat and also in the working group for preparing and contributing to this webinar. It was very nice also to have the IC coordinator, Marine Ballon, attending this webinar, and I'm convinced we will have a lovely collaboration with her in the future. And I will also add that working together with the Secretariat leading up to this webinar has been a very valuable experience and shows us a path forward in the communication and collaborations between the international committees and the ICOM leadership. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And as I mentioned, we will have the next webinar will be about the IRIS database, and we hope that we can hopefully be able to respond to some of the questions here and address what the particular challenges are.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Alberto, Peter, our colleagues at the working group. Special thanks to Florian, Morgan, and Marine for your contribution. All the presenters' PowerPoint presentation will be available, as well as the webinar recording link will be available in a few days in our toolbox within the ICOM website, International Committee site. So thank you, everybody. Ready?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Okay.
So that was good.
Yeah.